Klonoa. Klonoa is one of my favorite game series in all of video gaming. I love the stories, characters, adventures, lore, music, and really everything else about the games. Klonoa is what all fiction games should aspire to be, and in my opinion is the absolute definition of good, clean video gaming fun. So join me on this Klonoa series review. My name is Dark Lord Elliot. Klonoa is a game series that has an incredibly low number of fans, but fans that are very dedicated considering there have only been 2 games in the main series, Klonoa Door to Phantomile for PS1 and Klonoa 2 Lunatea's Veil for PS2. No other mainstream Klonoa games exist except for some one-off Game Boy games, and well, Door to Phantomile did have a full remake for the Wii, but that was back in 2009 for the 10-year anniversary of the PS1 original. So, in 2022, for the past 14 years, there's been nothing new about Klonoa. Klonoa Door to Phantomile was released on the PlayStation in 1998, produced and published by Namco. Klonoa was one of the hit sales in Japan in December 1997, selling over 50,000 copies in the first week on the market. But in America and Europe, these numbers were just never meant to be. Critics of the game said that it was too cute, too short, and the bosses were too hard. Ironically, Klonoa Door to Phantomile consistently received scores of 8 out of 10 or higher. Sadly, Metacritic seems to be unaware of the PS1 game's existence, despite it being directly referenced in the sequel's page. So, let's have a closer look at Klonoa Door to Phantomile for PS1. Today, if you want either an NTSC UC or PAL copy of Klonoa Door to Phantomile, you're not getting the original CD for anything under $100 US. Your alternatives are to buy it directly off the PlayStation Store for, here in the US, $5.99, or the Japanese NTSC-J version, which typically goes for around $40 on eBay. But you can download Klonoa for the PS3, PSP, or PS Vita. Sony's really trying to end those stores, so if you want it for any of those consoles, you better get it now before they go away forever. Klonoa is the absolute definition of a 2.5D story-driven platformer. Klonoa himself can only move left or right and jump or descend. While you can move only in those directions, that doesn't mean that there isn't a foreground or background. Indeed, sometimes you have to throw things toward or away from the player's perspective, rather than to the left or right. Klonoa has only a few moves he can do: D-pad to move, X or triangle to jump, square or circle to launch a wind bullet, which will grab and inflate or stun certain creatures and enemies, and can also give Klonoa a double jump of sorts. When jumping, you can press and hold X or triangle again to hover in the air for around a second. Then of course start to pause the game. That's it as far as controls. The main point of Klonoa is just to reach the end of the level. Klonoa is not, but somewhat is, a collectathon game of sorts. You'll collect Dreamstones, green one's worth 1, blue one's worth 5, and the dragonfly looking thing doubles each of those numbers. Ideally there are 150 Dreamstones in each vision, but you can sometimes get more. There are also 6 creatures per level that you have to rescue. Some of these are trapped in bubbles that you'll just find along the way, and others are inside of eggs, and one is even inside a flower. Coins will give you an extra life, pink hearts will replenish a hit point, and golden hearts will replenish 3 hit points. Hit points are taken when one thing that can hurt you does. Nothing will ever take 2 hit points at once, and you do get a few invincibility frames. There are a few little things in this game that you can interact with, such as this sign just outside of Klonoa's home at the start of the game, or you can bend the rules of this 2.5D realm by jumping onto perpendicular pathways in Gunston Mine and the first part of Forlock Forest. Klonoa starts with a pretty common FMV, which is a unique video that contains some original scenes and some scenes from other cutscenes throughout the game, as well as a delightful music track called Let's Go for a While. Once the opening cutscene ends, you're presented with the title screen. When you make a save game, you're prompted to input a name. Unlike most other games that have saved naming, this one actually comes back at the end of the game, and the book that closes, you see your name right there under Klonoa's. Someone's gifted you this book and embossed your name on it. The story of this game is actually very simple and easy to follow. In the first cutscene, not counting the teaser at the start of the game, Klonoa is just playing in the forest. Suddenly, a ring drops from the sky and smashes into the ground. Klonoa really wants that ring, so he pulls it right out of the ground. Klonoa then meets the ring spirit, Hupo. From then on, Klonoa and Hupo play and play until one day, the clouds become dark, the sun stops shining, as something is about to smash into the earth below. Klonoa then wakes up with fright, only for you to see that Hupo is sitting there, patiently waiting for him to wake up. Next is an in-game scene where a ship crashes into a bell on top of a hill. This, coincidentally, happens to be named Bell Hill, right after Klonoa's home in Breescale, the Wind Village. So the game proper begins. Klonoa and Hupo then journey to Bell Hill, passing through the Tower of the Moon Kingdom being constructed by Balyu, who is obsessed with the diva Laphise. Balyu explains that Laphise sings the songs of rebirth every so often to cleanse the world. Klonoa and Hupo also pass through the Gunston mine, only to see that the ship that has crashed belongs to none other than Laphise. This is where the game also introduces us the main villains of the game, Ghadius and his assistant Joka. Ghadius and Joka spend some time establishing who they are. Then Ghadius asks about the moon pendant, to which Joka says it's simply not there. Ghadius then notices Klonoa and Hupo and promptly returns to his stronghold. Joka is tasked with defeating Klonoa and Hupo and summons his Rongo Lango, a creature that's like a worm but with arms. Defeating Rongo Lango, Joka gets scared and runs away. However, in doing so, he hits the bell and the moon pendant falls to the ground below. Klonoa and Hupo take it to Klonoa's grandfather, who tells Klonoa to take the pendant to Forlock Forest's granny, as she knows a lot about the old stories and tales. Thus ends part 2 of the first vision. From there, Klonoa sets off to reach Granny in Forlock Forest. Klonoa travels deep into the dying, dehydrated forest. Klonoa meets a friendly native that explains how keys work. One key per door, and only the doors with the key symbol can be opened. Klonoa then meets a soldier who's concerned about the king of his homeland, so then Klonoa is diverted to Jugpot, the Water Kingdom. Jugpot has been experiencing strange goings-on, namely the waterfall is running backwards. After some platforming and questionable architecture, Klonoa and Hupo meet Karal, a fish who takes you to the king of Jugpot, Seadof. Seadof and Karel's mom, Pamela, are the second boss that you have to face in the game. After defeating Seadof, Joka comes back and reprimands Seadof, who is no longer under the spell of Ghadius. Seadof then apologizes to Klonoa and tells him that Granny is probably in grave danger and he'll make sure to make the water flow in the right direction. Seadof then calls Karel to come back and give Klonoa a ride back to Forlock Forest. Once back in Forlock Forest, Klonoa meets the native gondola operator, who is all tied up. Literally. Joka somehow learns that Klonoa is on his way, so he tells his creatures to hide the keys that Klonoa will need. Of course, having little time to hide them, the keys aren't hidden very well at all. Klonoa continues on until he reaches a dead end, and a friendly native guard summons a levitating piece of tree stump and tells Klonoa to get on. Klonoa is then thrown into a building and crashes into what I can only call a hockey net. Klonoa eventually reaches Joka, who stopped a windmill machine, so Klonoa must go get the key. Klonoa finds Joka in a somewhat hard-to-reach room, while Joka taunts Klonoa, saying he'll never get up that high. The player must then learn how to triple jump with the wind bullet jump. Joka freaks out and drops the key. Klonoa then acquires it and turns the machine back on. After climbing on top of the tower, Klonoa finally meets up with Granny, who is being held captive by Joka, who is trying to extort information from her. As Klonoa arrives, Joka throws his Gelgbalm, then leaves. Klonoa defeats it, then starts talking to Granny about what's been going on. Granny explains that there's a dark spirit that threatens to destroy the dream of the world. Her legend says that the Moon Pendant is the key to the Moon Kingdom. Granny tells that the way to the Moon Kingdom is by placing offerings at the pedestals in the Temple of the Sun. Joka then comes from around a corner and reveals that he's been eavesdropping the entire conversation and is heading to Klonoa's home to get the Moon Pendant. Granny tells Klonoa to go through the old ruins, but it's a dangerous shortcut to his home. Klonoa runs through the ruins of the Wind Kingdom, then the Leviathan's Ice Caverns. Klonoa arrives back near his home just in time to wave to his grandpa before Joka arrives. Joka then annihilates Klonoa's home and pulls out the Moon Pendant from the rubble. Klonoa rushes to see if his grandpa is alright, but Joka traps him on a bridge. Klonoa is then forced to face this Egyptian snake thing? When Klonoa defeats it, the bridge magically stabilizes and Klonoa rushes to his grandpa. Klonoa's grandpa is weak, having just been exploded on, but tells Klonoa that the Moon Pendant was just stolen. Klonoa's grandpa tells Klonoa that he's a great child of the wind and to fulfill his destiny, then promptly dies. A few minutes later, Hupo tells Klonoa that they need to reach the Temple of the Sun, but Klonoa just asks how. Just then, Pamela arrives, tells Klonoa that she already knows what happened from the King Seedoff and Granny. Klonoa wastes no time getting on her back in order to reach the Temple of the Sun. Pamela and Klonoa arrive at the entrance, and Klonoa gets in. Klonoa and Hupo then meet two of the priests, Soler and Solil, the words sun in Spanish and French respectively. Soler begs Klonoa to please find the 4 orbs that were stolen by Gadius' creatures, while Solil just parrots and adds some snide remarks. Upon returning the 4th orb to the 4th pedestal, the door behind Klonoa opens. It's at this point that Gadius is made clear who he actually is. Gadius is a dark spirit that's been asleep for 3,000 years, and now seeks revenge. Soler tells Klonoa that there's still time and to reach the altar before the seal is broken. Klonoa then meets the High Priest Morier, who tells him that Gadius has already broken the seal to the Moon Kingdom. The Moon Kingdom gathers up dream power and gives shape to Phantomile, that is, everything you see around you. Gadius wants to replace the dreams with nightmares and set loose evil upon the world. Also, since Gadius has control of the Moon Kingdom, he's causing solar eclipses, which gives strength to his creatures. Finally, Klonoa catches up to Gadius, who is about to ascend to the Moon Kingdom. Gadius explains to Klonoa that this is simple revenge and that only fools dream of only good dreams. With the help of the Diva Lafis, he plans on inverting the world into never-ending chaos and nightmares. However, just as Klonoa is about to follow Gadius to the Moon Kingdom, Joka steps in and challenges Klonoa, but this time face to face. The solar eclipses give power to Joka, who is able to greatly increase his size and even transform into some multicolor flying fish. Once Klonoa beats him, bruised and defeated, Joka gives his final ounce of strength for Gadius, then promptly dies. This leads into the second cutscene of the game, where the approximate size of Phantomile is revealed. If Phantomile is the planet, I'd say it's about the size of Mars. As Klonoa and Hupo reach inside the Moon Kingdom, a guard tells Hupo that the kingdom has been taken over by Gadius. The Queen then arrives and informs Hupo that Gadius has trapped Lafis into the egg below them and is pouring nightmare energy into her egg. This prompts Klonoa to ask who Hupo is, and it is revealed that Hupo is the Prince of Cress, the Moon Kingdom. Hupo asks for Klonoa to not ponder this for now and just help him save the world, and Klonoa agrees. In the inner sanctum of the Moon Kingdom, Gadius is preparing the Nightmare Crystal, Nahatom. Gadius realizes that there is one dream in Phantomile that cannot be corrupted, so instead it must be removed. This dream, as Gadius describes it, is a visitor and a traveler of foolish dreams. Klonoa arrives soon thereafter and confronts Gadius one more time, angrily demanding to know why Gadius is doing all of this in the first place. Gadius simply replies, "I am tired of this foolish world that neglects nightmares and relies only on good dreams. This is reason enough." Hupo reasons that if Gadius does this, he'll be erased with everyone and everything else. Gadius informs Hupo that he's already been abandoned by this world, so his death doesn't matter. This prompts the boss fight against Gadius, which is actually pretty complex compared to all the previous ones. Finally, the King, Queen, High Priest, Granny, Balyu, and Klonoa face the Nahatom. Given cannons from ancient times by the Queen of Cress, they rely on Klonoa to supply them ammo. They must all shoot at once, else the cannons will have no effect on the Nahatom. Klonoa does, but is unfortunately sucked into the Nahatom, and is forced to attack it from the inside. Once outside again, Klonoa and the rest attack the Nahatom again and weaken it to the point that Hupo can be shot into it and finally kill it. Lafis is released from the nightmares, but Klonoa believes Hupo to be dead. Instead, Hupo appears behind Klonoa and floats over. Klonoa notices how hurt Hupo looks and repeatedly insists that he'll never let go, but Hupo says he's just tired. A few days later, Klonoa and Hupo are sitting atop the hill next to Breezegale. Klonoa is just wanting to go back to normal and play with his friend. Hupo, on the other hand, is having an internal existential crisis. It is then revealed that Hupo summoned Klonoa to help them out with this mess. Hupo explains that every memory that Klonoa has, presumably prior to waking up at the beginning of the game, is a false memory that Hupo himself made for Klonoa's benefit. Klonoa takes it about as well as one would expect and starts screaming at Hupo that he's a liar. Hupo calmly states that it's all true and that the strange dream that Gadius spoke of was actually Klonoa. So, when Lafis sings her song of rebirth, Klonoa will be sent away, back to his world, along with everything else that doesn't belong. This leads into the final FMV of the game, where Klonoa is getting sucked into a wormhole and Hupo just stands there, apathetically at first, but then he tries to grab Klonoa to drag him back. Klonoa unfortunately can't hold on and is sucked into a wormhole. The world is reborn and the credits roll, revealing that this is a story that's been written down, made into a book, and given specifically to you. Insert your 8-character long name here, with your name embossed on the front cover right under the title, Klonoa. It's a beautiful, perfect end. Overall, I think that the story really is perfect, but perhaps it's not to everyone's liking. The story of Klonoa is specifically designed for kids, but has a bit of subtext meaning that you'll only understand once you're an adult. Since I never personally played this game as a kid, I've always understood it as is and never really had the luxury of replaying it as an adult. Although I do know what that's like with other games, just not this one. The first time I ever played Klonoa was on a demo disc for the PS1, probably PlayStation Magazine number 8 or 45. No idea which, and I don't know where the demo disc got to anyway. Klonoa Door to Phantomile is a game that I feel is pretty well balanced, a fun game that has a smooth difficulty curve. You won't be asked to do anything that's absurdly hard or even impossible anywhere in the game. On the other hand, when the game asks you to do something hard, it's because you're expected to know how to do what you're asked. That or you're ready to learn. Even the extra vision gives you 9 lives at the start of each phase of the challenge. That's where most of my lives came from. Klonoa has good control. The game engine is very solid, and I really cannot fault anything about the game's control. Movement is fluid, Klonoa has just the right amount of weight to him, the normal jump is just right. Basically everything they could have done right for movement and control, they did great. Sadly, I do have one complaint about Klonoa Door to Phantomile on PS1, but it's really not that big a deal. The game basically requires you beat it twice to 100%. See, once you reach the end of the game, having beaten every boss including Ghadius and Nahatom, you'll then see this screen where you're expected to replay every vision and gather all 150 intended Dreamstones from each. The simple fact of the matter is, this effectively doubles the length of the game if you want to have each level say 150 plus, with the blue Dreamstone. Fortunately, they did fix this in the 2009 Wii remake. I'm still not sure what having all 150 plus Dreamstones in a vision actually means, or if there's a reason to on PS1. Levels in Klonoa games are called visions, playing on the origin of Klonoa's name. The original Japanese title of the game is Kaze no Klonoa, or translated Klonoa of the Wind. See, Klonoa is a character that doesn't actually exist in really any world. He's somewhat of a guardian angel, and his name, Klonoa, translates to dream traveler in their non-language. Also, he lives in Wind Village. So there's that. There are other things in this game as well. If you save 6 of the inhabitant creatures from every vision, 72 in total, you'll be awarded the chance to beat Extra Vision. The creatures you have to save do stack so you don't have to get them all in one in any given level. Extra Vision takes place after the main game, where you have to ascend Balyu's tower. This is a challenge that some players simply won't even want to attend. Balyu is actually very rude to Klonoa and Hupo, saying that they're not special for having saved the world, and actually it was his love for Laphise that saved the world. Anyway, you'll need all of your skill to beat this vision, and especially beating it with all 150 Dreamstones too. Your reward for reaching the top in under an hour is to watch Balyu get brother-zoned by Laphise. Laphise then shows Klonoa and Hupo an invention that Balyu made for her. This unlocks the music player in the level select menu, where you can play songs from the game. So with all that said, I do think that Klonoa Door to Phantomile is worth a play on the PS1, 2, Portable, Vita, 3, or Classic. This game does run properly with few if any glitches on pretty much anything that can play PlayStation games. I do recall back in 2014 or 15, I think, playing Klonoa on the PSP, and it would sometimes crash when loading in the boss. I don't know what causes this, but it seemed to be pretty random, so just restarting the game and replaying that vision seemed to work out. A hassle, yes, but what else can you do when it hardlocks? Also, the Classic seems to enable tunnel reverb effects on some parts of the game that it shouldn't, specifically around Visions 5, 6, and Final, but that's the extent of the glitches I've seen. On the Vita, I didn't notice any glitches at all, and the Vita never hardlocked. Overall, with everything I've said here, I really can't fault this game on anything, so Klonoa Door to Phantomile for PS1 gets 10 out of 10. This game is perfect for what it is and a great representation of video gaming in general. Klonoa is a very well thought through game, and I'm happy to have played it. But what is a good game if it doesn't have a good sequel? The next stop on our list is Klonoa 2, Lunatea's Veil for PlayStation 2. Developed in 2000 and 2001 by Namco and the newly created Klonoa Works, Klonoa 2 Lunatea's Veil was effectively a launch title for the PS2, meaning the game would probably have been even better had it come out a year or two later, once the PS2 had been out for a while and the developers knew how to get what they wanted out of it easier. This is painfully evident with some of the glitches that this game has when emulating it, though most of those are purely graphical. Unfortunately, Klonoa 2 is somewhat a hard game to get up and running even on a PS2 if you're not running it off a DVD. It also has no digital re-releases that I'm aware of. Klonoa 2 has audio glitches if you run it off a hard drive in OPL 2. About the best way to run this game, aside from DVD on a real PS2, is to emulate it in PCSX2. There are some glitches, but the main one is audio, which can be sorted by simply setting the audio to async and setting the timing to 3 milliseconds. But if you're dead set on playing the PS2 version, you need to activate modes 1, 2, 3, and 6, and if you have the option, activate MDMA 0. That seems to fix all the issues with the American version of Klonoa 2. However, even with all that said, I can't count that against Klonoa 2 because the developers didn't actually know that someone would one day attach a hard drive to load this game, so that won't affect my review score. Gameplay and collectibles are fundamentally identical from Klonoa to Klonoa 2, so you already know what's got to be done. Klonoa 2 differs from its predecessor by not having pre-rendered opening or closing FMVs. Everything here is rendered in real time in the game. Klonoa 2 also has a new cast of characters with none of the previous returning except for the titular Klonoa. Here, Klonoa is alone in a sense. But that's okay, because the previous game isn't referenced at all and you wouldn't actually lose anything for having only played the sequel. Nothing gained, nothing lost, so to speak. Klonoa 2 starts with a strange being repeatedly saying "help me" and Klonoa falling out of the sky on Lunatea, the new world that Klonoa must help to save this time around. The main villains of this game are just flying by in their flying machine. They'll introduce themselves later, but upon seeing the other main characters, they leave to prepare. Klonoa then wakes up on the shore next to Lolo, a priestess in training, and Popka, her... I don't even know what Popka is supposed to be. What does the manual say?
Loud-mouthed, pushy, and insensitive. He isn't the ideal partner by any means. However, deep down inside, he cares for Lolo greatly and supports her from the sidelines. Okay, but what is he? I'm looking at this and I genuinely cannot tell even what they were going for. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's cute.
Anyway, Lolo, a mouse, or mostly hairless monkey, I'm not sure which, explains that there's a disaster currently befalling Lunatea, and that Klonoa is the name of the dream traveler who will save them. Klonoa doesn't know about all that, but is glad to help out. Lolo and Popka are interrupted telling Klonoa about what's going on when a monster dives out of the sea and tries to attack them. From there, the game proper begins. Klonoa looks a lot different from the original game, being as the original game was essentially pixel art, whereas Klonoa 2 looks like a real PS2 game. This is what Klonoa is supposed to look like and what all modern representations tend to lean towards. This is where the first major glitch occurs, what I call the loading glitch. I'll cover this particular glitch more, but after the story. Anyway, when Klonoa and Lolo get to the bottom of the Sea of Tears, Klonoa rings the bell with Lolo in the spirit ring, so she apparently rings the bell. This means that she's a full priestess for some reason. From there, they go to meet Baguji the Wise. Baguji is the true main character in the sense that he propels the story from one task to another. Here, he tells you to go collect the essences of the kingdoms expressed in a small ball of matter. Elements, they call them. Gathering all 4 of them will allow Klonoa and Lolo to prevent the 5th kingdom from appearing. Lolo happens to need to see the High Priestess who lives in the temple in La Lakusha. When they arrive, the High Priestess gives Lolo a leaf for her hat and suggests that they go collect the closest element, the element of tranquility, also located in La Lakusha. After the High Priestess tells Klonoa that he's a kind lad, they're on their way again. This is where we're formally introduced to Leorina the Sky Pirate and her cute sidekick, Tat. Leorina wants Klonoa's spirit ring and is willing to get it by any means necessary. So she has her monster, Fulguron, to attack Klonoa. After defeating it, Klonoa gets the element of tranquility and starts hearing the dream voice again. Since nobody else can hear it, they just assume he's spacing out, I guess. Klonoa and friends then go back to Baguji, who tells them to go to Joyland, the Kingdom of Joy, which actually looks more like an amusement park, and get their element. Upon arriving, Tat steals the element of tranquility and shows her one useful ability. She's actually two entities and can split apart at will. This leads Klonoa and friends to chase her around the park. It doesn't matter which one you choose, it'll always be the wrong one. This choice is actually just the illusion of choice. Your choices are to the left to stroll through the theme park, to the right a nice relaxing ride down a water slide on a waterboard. Each one is actually quite a memorable experience in Joyland because the theme park path actually takes you through the park to the Ghost Palace attraction. The water slide leads you to learn about the new type of level that you'll play: waterboarding, snowboarding, and later, even sandboarding. When you finally catch the correct half of Tat, she'll give up the element without too much of a fuss. But back in the main entryway to Joyland, Leorina has summoned some sort of evil demon clown known as Leptio. This is where Leorina appears again and reveals that she's after the data behind the spirit ring. When Klonoa and friends get back to Bakuji, he tells them that they should go to Volk, the Warring Kingdom, a place where the citizens live to fight. It's here that Leorina has her set up with a creepy copy of the spirit ring in some sort of test tube. Leorina tells Tat to overload the generators, so Klonoa and friends set off to turn them off. In the underground, you meet Tat again and have a mini boss battle with her. After deactivating both generators, you face the mobile tank Biskarsh, who is one of the only bosses to follow you into the next level. Pretty cool unless you're playing on an emulator where the fire doesn't load. Anyway, Leorina manages to use her fake spirit ring to ring the bell of discord, and she leaves with the element. Once you get back again to Bakuji, he tells you to collect the final element from the Kingdom of Solitude Mira Mira. What makes this particularly hard is that Mira Mira is isolated, and strangers are not welcome. How to get there then? By reactivating the Ancient Ark, a great ship with 3 engines that takes people not just to Mira Mira, but from one kingdom to another. Ishra's Ark has lain dormant for so long that it has moss growing all over it. Klonoa must restart each of the 3 engines using a new type of projectile enemy known in the game manual as the Curie. This creature is unique in that it can be used multiple times so long as it hits a target. It starts without a shine, then with one target having been hit gets a yellow shine, 2 a blue shine, and then 3 a red shine. Each engine presents a puzzle for getting the red shine in order to start the engine. None are too difficult, but they do make you think about order of operations. Upon reaching the mountains of Mira Mira, Klonoa and friends realize that the road is covered in snow, so Popka reveals that he stole the waterboard from Joyland. Initially, Klonoa and Lolo are understandably upset with him, but then realize it's way too late now to do anything about it, so they may as well use it. Once through the town, without even having stopped to ask for directions, Klonoa and friends find a curious building resting off the cliff. This is the Maze of Memories, a hall of mirrors with the ability of reaching into beings that look into them and extracting the source of emotions, as Lolo finds out the hard way. This leads her into a depression where she doesn't think that she can help, making Klonoa's spirit ring useless. Klonoa and friends come upon an old withered tree and the bell of indecision. The tree tells them that they must pass the test in order to ring the bell, to which Klonoa isn't sure that he can without his ring, and by extension, Lolo. So the tree summons a giant egg, Palante. Klonoa fights as much as he can, but eventually he needs Lolo's help to defeat Palante. Popka gives her some choice words, including fool, which is enough of her to snap out of it, and she eagerly helps Klonoa finish the job. The old tree commends them and says that your determination in particular, quote-unquote, was impressive. I really don't know who it's talking about to or about in the context of that sentence. Klonoa and friends go back to the island where Bakuji lives, and he tells them to show him the 3 elements you already have, Liarina having 1 from Volk. Bakuji then cryptically says, "That makes 4, to which Popka notices that Bakuji doesn't smell like Bakuji, and Bakuji reveals that he's actually Liarina. Liarina does something with the 4 elements that awakens the chaos. It's here that the game starts getting pretty frustratingly difficult in parts. For instance, where you were before in the cave sections of Lalakusha were just that. Now, Klonoa and Lolo can't breathe except by one of these statues, so it's a forced timing puzzle on top of the existing platforming puzzle. At the temple, when you meet the High Priestess again, she tells you a story about a young girl who wanted to become a priestess, but solely for her own power and gain. A girl named Leo, who became this Liarina. Leo was formerly trained to be a priestess, so has all the qualifications necessary to use a spirit ring. Liarina then summons the Ark to the Sea of Tears and opens the path to the 5th Kingdom to emerge into this world. It is now the duty of Klonoa to destroy the Ark that he resurrected before it can successfully connect the world. So Klonoa reaches the edge of the sea, which has now been drained of any water, and uses the waterboard to surf the sand to reach a cannon that will send him up to the Ark. But before Klonoa and friends can destroy the Ark, Liarina challenges Klonoa before being turned into a monster herself. Klonoa defeats the cursed Liarina, and she promptly switches sides. Liarina has just learned a valuable lesson. You don't use power, it uses you. Klonoa then destroys all 3 engines of the Ark with the help of Liarina, bringing it down just outside the 5th Kingdom. Once inside the 5th Kingdom, the Kingdom of Sorrow, Liarina tells Klonoa that there's still time and that he must hurry and defeat the King of Sorrow. Fortunately, there are only 3 stages left in the game, but unfortunately, they're the hardest in the game. There really isn't that much story in the final few levels, but the level's tone and difficulty speak for itself, far more rugged and unpolished than the rest of the game. It's actually a really well-made tonal shift. Klonoa finally meets the King of Sorrow face to face. And, just an observation here, but the King of Sorrow kind of looks like an evil Klonoa. Anyway, the King of Sorrow believes that since Klonoa is there, he must be there to stop and banish sorrow. Lolo demands an explanation as to why the king made the bell, to which he responds that the bell has always been a part of Lunatea, but the people there had willfully veiled their eyes from it. Pretty nice subtle title drop, if I may say so myself. The king then reveals that he was either behind or actually was Bakuji the Wise, I'm not sure which, and that it was him, the King of Sorrow, that led Klonoa, the Dream Traveler, this far on this quest. Liarina then shows up and tells Klonoa that the king is nothing more than a lump of pure sorrow, and the only way for him to see sense is to be exposed to the other elements, tranquility, joy, discord, and indecision. After defeating the King of Sorrow, Klonoa and friends, including Liarina and Tat, show him the error of his ways. The King of Sorrow lays in Klonoa's arms, and Klonoa promises that the world will never again forget sorrow. Then the king dies, or something. Klonoa rings the Bell of Sorrow to finally allow it to be one of the recognized kingdoms in Lunatea. Liarina turns her life around, and instead of being a sky pirate, is now an exonerated member of their society and is helping to rebuild the Kingdom of Sorrow. Lolo has given up her title as priestess, being as Klonoa was the one that got her that title in the first place, so she wants to get it on her own. Popka just pretends to be asleep to give Klonoa some time alone with Lolo, and Klonoa, knowing that his job there is done, walks away back into the eternal void from where he came. Thus the game ends, and the credits roll. So with the story having been told, I want to have a closer look at the gameplay of this brilliant game. Let's start with the loading glitch that I mentioned at the start of this game. Klonoa 2, on some LCD and LED screens, the game completely blanks out for an average of 1 to 2 seconds. In order to explain why this happens, I'd have to explain analog TV, which I really don't want to, as it'd take way too long and you still might not understand. The basic version is, the signal gets turned off so the TV assumes that the signal is just gone, but the game is just resting, for lack of a better word. Now, this I can actually count against the game in my review score. There were plenty of flat screens back in 2000 that Klonoa Works and or Namco could have tested on. This was so avoidable! What's even worse, sometimes my capture card didn't resync with the video, so I'd have to either run back and forth between segments of the stage, or worse, have to pause and unplug some cables hoping that would fix the issue. Usually it didn't, and actually made the problem worse. This is probably the worst aspect of playing Klonoa 2 on original hardware in the current day. What's worse, there's at least one of these in every single non-boss battle or storyline vision. And some of them you can actually get hurt from the glitch. I can't hardly find CRTs that support composite anymore, and I live in one of the biggest cities, not just in the United States, but in North America. This is how the game was intended to be played. But this is how we play it nowadays. This really should have been anticipated by the developers, and I'm quite surprised that this is the only game that has a glitch like this, least that I'm aware of. Fortunately, this doesn't happen on emulators. There are actually 2 extra visions in Klonoa 2, both by Mamet the Dollmaker. The first for having found a single doll from any of the visions, and the second for having found all the dolls in the game. Finding the dolls isn't that hard, and there are 6 in every vision, except boss battles and story stages. Unlike the original game, Klonoa 2 has a reward for collecting 150 or more Dreamstones in a given vision. In Klonoa 2, you get some high-quality artworks of each stage that you get 150 plus Dreamstones in. With that said, I think that Klonoa 2 is really great. It's by far one of my favorite games for the PS2, and I really do love playing it. There are some annoyances and some compromises that must be made though. For one, as previously mentioned, for best experience, you'll want to play the Japanese or American version on the PCSX2 emulator. For another, if you want to play the PS2 version but aren't about to pay $100 for this one either, you'll quickly find the aforementioned glitches in the American and European PS2 ROMs, unless you enable modes 1, 2, 3, 6, and if applicable, set MDMA 0. Klonoa 2 Lunatea's Veil for PS2 gets a near-perfect and very solid 9.5 out of 10. I can't let that loading glitch slide though. Klonoa 2 Lunatea's Veil for PS2 is a better sequel than a lot of sequels out there. Great story, great gameplay, extremely well-made and well-thought-through characters, and beautiful environments that meld a fantasy world perfectly. Klonoa deserves better than to just be forgotten. Far inferior games don't have the loading glitch that Klonoa 2 does, and this is practically the only PS2 game that I'm aware of that does have it. One other minor annoyance I have is that several stages feel quite long and others quite short. In the original Klonoa, all the stages felt about the same length up until the Temple of the Sun and Moon Kingdom stages, but that's a minor criticism at that, if anything. More of an observation. One thing that I haven't mentioned until now is that Klonoa 2 actually supports 5.1 channel surround sound on the original PS2. Keeping in mind that this game was released in 2001, the art in Klonoa and Klonoa 2 is something that really has to be seen firsthand to really appreciate. There was clearly love that went into making these games, and while I can be cynical or even critical of the game, I do appreciate and am willing to put up with quite a bit for what is here. From the inventive look of the train and Volk to the brickwork in Joyland Plaza to even the character designs of Klonoa, Popka, Leptio, even as far as the King of Sorrow, everything has a place and everything is in its place. Klonoa 2, even for a PS2 game, is one of the most unique, and I love it for that. And if you want to really appreciate the art of this game, the best way to view it is through the PCSX2 emulator running the Japanese or American ROM. If you don't want to do that, I do have exactly that as a video series on Vidyard that's in 4K 60, but presently only in Japanese since I couldn't figure out how to get the American ROM to work properly. I know now and have a tutorial on how to get the American ROM to work on emulator. But to reiterate, even the uglies in Klonoa are beautifully ugly in that they match the game. Simply put, the Klonoa series was clearly a work of love. I'm going to divert here just a little bit because I find this terribly interesting. When playing PS1 games, since they load from a CD, you might assume all PS1 games use CD audio, but they do not. In Klonoa, there's enough music to fill about 2 CDs if the audio is uncompressed CD quality WAV. To get around this, the music is not lossless 44.1 16-bit, but a lot of audio that you can extract from games like Klonoa or Spyro the Dragon are actually in 37.8 kHz. This makes the songs a good bit smaller with practically no loss of quality. It's like making a give or take 1000 kilobits a second FLAC for the game, though I'm actually okay with that because they were limited to a hard 700 megabytes per CD, and you'll never be able to hear the difference between the sources. For Klonoa 2 being a PS2 game, it should play in 44.1 or 48 kHz at a full 16-bit quality. Fortunately, there are official releases of the Klonoa and Klonoa 2 soundtracks on cassette tapes, CD, and even vinyl record, so that's really cool. I really love the stories of the Klonoa games and do appreciate what the writers, artists, and developers were going for. The way each game ends legitimately ends the games and completes the story. I'm not aware of any real plot holes in either game, but I'm not exactly a professional writer. Yet. In Door to Phantomile, the game ends with the story ending, literally. Hupo tries to save Klonoa, but in failing, the story ends and it cuts to reveal the final page of the book recounting the entire story that you just played through. That's a beautiful ending. Who wrote the story? I don't know. Maybe it was you, the player. Though in Lunatea's Veil, Lolo doesn't want Klonoa to leave, but Klonoa convinces her that this is the way that has to be. Popka, on the other hand, just sits there pretending to be asleep, presumably so that he doesn't have to say goodbye. Klonoa and Lolo share in a hug one last time, and Klonoa walks off into the white void. From there, the credits play and it's back to the title screen. There is no book, no FMVs, nothing. Just walking off, then cut to credits. Best ending ever. Aside from the story, the main differences between Klonoa and Klonoa 2 are the types of enemies that you'll encounter. Most enemies from the first game do carry over, but some have been specifically made for Lunatea's Veil. Take the Khitan, Jetimo, Ibril, and Lukiri as examples. In Klonoa, most every enemy that you grab is more or less the same as one another, just another skin. But in Klonoa 2, these 4 specific enemies have abilities that make them special, and in turn more useful than just for throwing or double jumping. I should also talk about the Popka jump. I was only made aware of this year, 2022. I think that this is a great overlooked feature that you'd likely have no idea exists unless someone told you. I only know because I saw it in the game manual, because I happen to own an original copy of the game, because I bought it for $14 on eBay back in 2014. The Popka jump is intended to be used with a second controller, where the second controller only controls one aspect of Popka, boosting Klonoa. So here's what I do and do not like about it. On the one hand, it's great for when there are no enemies nearby and you need to get up higher than Klonoa can reasonably jump. Also, you can use it as a triple jump by double jumping with the creature that you're holding and then Popka jumping, but in either order. What I really don't care for is that this requires 2 controllers. What's even worse, there are 2 completely unallocated buttons on the first controller, and that's exactly how many you need to use the Popka jump. So if you play on an emulator, I do highly recommend just putting the controller 1's select and R2 as player 2's start and square, respectively. I don't actually know if there is a way to do this on original hardware, and when I asked on PSX Place, they simply never even responded, even after 3 months. I don't think I'll be asking for help there again. Since I mentioned it already, I'd like to have a look at the Wii remake of Klonoa Door to Phantomile. Since I hate Nintendo and want them to go bankrupt, I don't actually own a Wii or any other Nintendo products, so I've only ever played this on the Dolphin emulator. Klonoa for Wii was released on the 5th of May 2009 for the 10th anniversary of the original PS1 release on the 10th of March 1998, 11 years prior. In short, this is the absolute gold standard of what a remake game should be. Klonoa Door to Phantomile for Wii is functionally one-to-one to the original PS1 game. Really, it's the same game, but made in a way that makes it graphically comparable to Lunatea's Veil, although 8 years later. So we're already off to a great start. First, I really don't care a lot for the characters' redesigns in the game. I'm fully aware that they are the same characters, but I think some of them look too cartoony and young when compared to the realistic background. In Lunatea's Veil, every character looks like the surroundings, which is to say, they fit in. Also, in Lunatea's Veil, I always loved the black border around the characters. But in Door to Phantomile for Wii, every human character looks like a newborn with perfect skin and no complexion. Most anthropomorphic characters look fine and actually look as good as the PS1 original version. Problem characters are Hupo in his human form, the Queen, and the native villagers. This can actually be pretty well seen in the 3D model viewer, which you can unlock for beating the game and having collected all 72 creatures. You can also choose costumes for Klonoa, which is really neat. Another thing that I neglected to mention until now, for some reason they decided to make the game easier by giving you an extra 4 hit points. Klonoa for PS1 had 6, PS2 had 3, now Wii has 10. I've been told that the Wii version is actually harder, so this is compensation for that, but I've never actually seen the Wii version being any harder than the PS1 version. Sadly, right out the gate, having started a brand new game, there's already an issue.
Did you see that? Something crashed into Bell Hill. Let's go and take a look.
Yeah! Come on, let's go!
See, for whatever reason, the developers of Klonoa for Wii decided to record all the dialogue in English as well as others, including the original Phantomile language. The English voice actors don't fit the characters for the most part, and the worst ones are Klonoa himself and Hupo. In this story, Klonoa is supposed to be a child out on an adventure, but the English voice lines sound like a late teenager bordering on an adult. Now, I'd have no issue if they actually tried to get a voice actor that sounded like the original PS1 cast, but they simply didn't. So, I played through the Wii remake in English for my first and only time, just to get the video for my 4K 60 playthrough. I'd take points off my score if they omitted the Klonoa language from the game, but fortunately, they didn't. Now, normally I don't like non-language games. There are some games that use absolute nonsense for speech, such as Croc, Banjo-Kazooie, or Animal Crossing, just to name a few off the top of my head, and I've never personally played the latter two. Those I hate for the fact that it's just pure laziness. It's recording one sound, reversing it, playing it back, then adding some random pauses, glitches, or fluctuations that you're supposed to interpret as speech. Fine for games that predate the PS1, when space was an issue, released prior to December 1994, but anything after should have unique voice lines for most, if not every single line of even slightly different dialogue, if they chose to record dialogue. There are plenty of story-driven games that don't have a line of spoken dialogue, and that's fine too. Klonoa, however, is a good bit different from other non-language games. While it is a non-language game with little continuity between what is said and what is written, they actually took the time to record almost every voice line in the game, and on top of that, most characters consistently use the same or very similar words for the same proper nouns, like characters' names or the names of the original 4 kingdoms in Lunatea. That's a far cry from me going then adding text to it and calling it dialogue. In short, Klonoa's non-language actually has class and a bit of consistency. I'd appreciate an English option that actually tried to match the characters to the voice, but that's not very necessary. Of course, one of the worst things that they did in the Klonoa Wii remake was to change some things as written. Now, I can't honestly call this censorship because the scene where Klonoa's grandfather dies is still there and pretty much unaltered. No, this is more of using more proper terms, such as changing Forlock Forest's granny to Chiefess of Forlock Forest, and Hupo's and Joka's names were changed. There were also some smaller changes before and after the final fight with Ghadius. Not a huge issue, but worth mentioning. It's like if Klonoa for Wii was directed by someone that recently played the game within the last week or two, but was going off his memory for most of what the players said and what exactly their names were. Klonoa Door to Phantomile for Wii is a very respectable game, and even with the few things that I don't like or appreciate about it, that's really as far as it goes. I don't necessarily like the changes, but they don't really affect the game that much. Still, defaulting the language to English means that if someone never played the original Klonoa game for PS1, they might think that's how Klonoa is supposed to sound. And he doesn't. Not what I'd have done. I'd have defaulted it to Klonoa language and not called it Phantomile. But that's me and probably every other sane person on the planet. So seeing as it's the same game, but with even more content, a higher quality soundtrack built in, lots more detailed environments, and one-to-one gameplay, this is Klonoa 1 with Wii graphics, and I really can't fault it on much, if anything. That said, Klonoa Door to Phantomile for Wii gets a perfect 10 out of 10, just like the original. I'm not so bigoted that I refuse to allow using more proper speech or having the characters say something slightly different than in the source game. Some of the characters don't look exactly how I want them to, but again, I'm not so bigoted that I can't handle change. Plus, for what it is and when it came out, Klonoa for Wii is a perfectly acceptable way to play Klonoa and get the story. For what it is, the Wii remake is exactly what I'd expect coming from Nintendo in 2009. I'm Dark Lord Elliot, and we're done here. Indeed. I don't know if I should redo that. Nah. To summarize, Klonoa is a video game series that I love. It's everything that a fantasy game should be. One final thing, playing Klonoa 2 on an emulator in 4K with proper deinterlacing at a solid 60 frames a second actually makes the game look like a PS4 game. If you don't believe me, just have a look at the recent, new Super Lucky's Tale, which looks like a PS2 game upscaled to PS4 standards, but with some graphics that the PS2 simply can't do. That said, Klonoa deserves a new game, which is why I'm actually really excited to see the new Klonoa Fantasy Reverie series coming soon to all new-gen consoles. Seeing as these are just remakes of the existing two PlayStation classics, I'm hoping that they don't censor, abridge, or straight up cut anything. Not even like they did in Klonoa for Wii. And of course, I will be playing the Klonoa Fantasy Reverie series, and I'll be playing it on PS5. I'm not sure if this will, but I want this to lead to a new Klonoa game, and hopefully a new series. At the very least, I want for this to fix the things that went so wrong in Klonoa 2 to cost it the hard 10 out of 10 that it deserved. Though what I really want for the Klonoa Fantasy Reverie series is to be the definitive way to experience the two main Klonoa games in the modern day. I expect to see ray tracing, Ultra HD graphics, 60 frames a second minimum, HDR10, and at least 5.1 channel surround throughout both games on PS5. I don't think I will be disappointed, unlike the last two times I was excited about full game remakes of classic games from the 90s. Only time will tell though.
You're dead to me. You died too. You were actually pretty good until the microtransactions, but after that you died too. You're all dead to me.
Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and want to come back and see more of my content. Check back to see what I had to say about the Klonoa Fantasy Reverie series in about a month. But until then, I'm Dark Lord Elliot, and we're done here for now.